Wide open just for you, the giant bride teased, and the rancher's breath caught at what he saw below. Witness this unbelievable, true inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share where you're watching from. Now, let's begin our journey. The wind on the high plains was the kind that could tell stories if you listened long enough. It came whispering through the grass, brushing against weather-beaten fences, carrying the scent of rain and faraway places. Somewhere under that wide Wyoming sky, a lone rider pushed his horse against the coming storm. His name was Cole McCready, a man who'd lived his whole life by the rhythm of the land. Sunrise, work, sunset, silence. Day after day, the same horizon, the same ache of something missing. Folks in town said Cole had a good life, but he knew better. There was no song in solitude, only the echo of his own heartbeat in the dark. That night, the clouds gathered low and heavy, rolling over the prairie like a dark sea. Lightning flared on the ridge, splitting the world open for a second at a time. Cole pulled his coat tighter and leaned into the wind. He wasn't sure where he was headed, only that the storm was faster than him. Then he saw it, a flicker of light on the far slope. A cabin, small and lonely, its window glowing like a promise. He urged his horse forward. The rain came hard. By the time he reached the porch, he was drenched through. He knocked once. The door opened before he could lift his hand again. A woman stood there, framed by the fire behind her. Her shadow stretched long across the floorboards. She was tall, strong-shouldered, her face calm but alert, like she had weathered more than one storm in her life. "Come in," she said. Her voice was low, certain. "You'll freeze out there." Cole stepped inside. The warmth hit him first, then the smell, smoke, cedar, and coffee on the stove. He removed his hat awkwardly. "Much obliged, ma'am." "Name's Mara," she said, taking his coat and hanging it by the door. "Sit close to the fire. It's wide open, just for you." He smiled a little at that, unsure why those simple words felt like something more than hospitality. Maybe it was the way she said them, not like a hostess, but like someone offering a place in the world. The storm raged outside, thunder shaking the cabin walls. Inside, time slowed. Mara poured coffee into 2 tin mugs and handed him one. Their hands brushed for a moment. A spark so small it could have been imagination, but it warmed him more than the fire did. They spoke quietly at first. He told her about the ranch, the cattle, the loneliness. She listened, nodding, eyes thoughtful. Then she told him her story, how she'd come west alone after her husband died in the mines, how she'd built this place herself, plank by plank. There was pride in her voice, but gentleness too. Cole watched her as she spoke. The firelight moved across her face, softening the lines of strength there. She looked like someone carved from the land, rooted, unshakable. And yet there was a sadness beneath her calm, the kind only another lonely heart could recognize. For a while they said nothing. The storm filled the silence for them. Cole stared into the flames, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, not peace exactly, but the edge of it. When he finally looked up, Mara was watching him. "You're a quiet man," she said. "Never had much reason to talk," he replied, half smiling. "Maybe you just never had anyone who'd listen." Her words landed softly but deep. Outside, the thunder rolled away into the distance. The worst of the storm was passing. Cole stood, moving to the window. The rain had slowed to a whisper. Moonlight fought its way through the clouds, silvering the wet earth. He turned back toward her. "Looks like it's clearing," he said. Mara nodded. "Storms don't last forever." "Nothing does." She walked to the door, opened it, and the wind poured in, cold, clean, carrying the smell of pine and soil. She looked back over her shoulder and smiled. "See that sky? Wide open just for you." Cole stepped beside her. The clouds were breaking, the stars pushing through one by one. He felt the strange pull of belonging, as if the land itself had opened a space for him. And somehow, she was part of that space. They stood in silence a long while, side by side, watching the horizon breathe again. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "You built this place alone?" "Every board," she said. Figured if the world was gonna be wide and empty, I might as well fill one corner of it myself. He nodded slowly. You done fine. Mara looked at him, something unspoken in her eyes, a question maybe, or an invitation. But she turned back to the stars before he could read it. The wind eased, the fire behind them still glowing. Cole knew he should be heading home. The storm was gone, and the ranch would need tending come morning. But the thought of leaving felt heavier than it should. He wanted to stay a little longer, to listen to her voice, to hear the quiet between them that somehow wasn't empty. Coffee'll be cold soon, Mara said. Finally closing the door, they sat again by the hearth. The logs cracked and fell, sending sparks up the chimney. She reached for her cup, and he found himself studying the roughness of her hands, the steadiness of her movements. There was beauty there, not fragile, not fleeting, but earned. Outside, the plains slept beneath a blanket of mist. Inside, two souls who'd spent too long alone found a small corner of warmth in the middle of a wild night. And though neither spoke it aloud, something in both their hearts knew the storm hadn't brought ruin. It had brought meeting, the kind of meeting that changes the quiet forever. The morning came slow and gold across the plains. Mist still clung to the low valleys, and the grass glittered with last night's rain. Cole woke to the faint smell of coffee and wood smoke. For a second, he didn't remember where he was. Then he saw the rough-hewn beams of Mara's cabin and heard her humming somewhere outside. He rose, pulled on his boots, and stepped out into the light. The world after a storm always looked new, washed clean, reborn. Mara was by the corral, feeding her mare, hair loose, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She turned when she heard him and smiled, that easy, quiet smile that didn't need words. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he answered, voice still rough with sleep. "You hungry? I made biscuits. Nothing fancy," he chuckled softly. "After a night like that, anything warm is fancy." They ate on the porch, the sky stretching wide above them. Cole watched the sun climb and thought how strange it felt to share a table again. It wasn't just the food that filled him, it was the company, the sound of another person's voice mixing with the morning wind. After breakfast, he saddled his horse. "I should get back," he said, though his heart argued otherwise. Mara nodded. "The herd won't wait." She walked with him to the gate. "But storms don't pass for nothing, Cole. They blow things together sometimes." He met her eyes. Maybe this one did. He rode off then. The image of her standing by the fence burned deep in his mind. The prairie stretched endless around him, but it didn't feel empty anymore. Days turned to weeks. Work filled his hands, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman in the cabin by the valley. He told himself it was just gratitude. She'd given him shelter when he needed it. But gratitude didn't explain why he caught himself looking toward the northern hills every sunset. One Saturday, when the chores were done and the sky turned copper, he saddled his horse again and rode north. The trail was clearer this time, the season softening. He found Mara outside, splitting wood. "You again," she said with a smile that reached her eyes. "You bring another storm with you?" "Not unless you count dust," he said, dismounting. "Figured I owed you thanks. Never got to say it proper." "Well, come on in then." "You can thank me over supper." They talked through the evening. She asked about his ranch. He asked about her garden. The talk wandered from cattle prices to childhood memories to favorite songs. When the lantern burned low, silence settled between them. Not awkward, just full. Cole stood by the window, looking at the moon hanging low over the fields. "You ever get tired of being out here alone?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but I made my peace with it." "You," he turned to face her. "I thought I had. Now I'm not so sure." Mara's gaze held his for a long moment. "You don't have to be sure tonight. Just be here." He stayed. Over the next months, the rhythm of their lives began to weave together. Cole would ride up every few days, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes nothing but a story. They mended fences side by side, shared coffee in the dawn chill. laughed at the stubborn mule that refused to pull the plow straight. It wasn't a courtship in words. It was one built in small acts, her setting aside an extra biscuit for him, his fixing her roof without being asked. The plains saw it happen quietly, like spring grass growing after frost. One evening in late summer, Mara and Cole sat on the porch watching a storm gather again on the horizon. The air was heavy, the sky bruised purple and gold. "Remember the first one?" she said. He nodded. "Hard to forget. Thought the world was ending that night?" She looked at him, a soft smile touching her lips. "And yet here we are." When the first drops of rain fell, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The thunder rolled, closer this time, but it sounded different, not threatening, just alive. The rain came down in silver sheets, soaking them both. They didn't run inside. They stood there laughing, letting the storm wash over them, two silhouettes against the lightning-lit sky. For Cole, it felt like a promise that some storms were worth standing in. Autumn crept in, painting the hills in rust and gold. Mara's cabin became more than a refuge. It became part of his days. He still worked the ranch, but evenings drew him north. The men in town started to notice the change. "MacCready's got a light in his eyes again," old Hank at the feed store said. Cole just smiled. One night, while they sat by the fire, Mara pulled a folded piece of paper from a drawer. It was a land claim, her land. She looked at him quietly. "I've been thinking," she said. "This place could use another pair of hands. Someone who knows how to keep fences mended and hearts steady." He took the paper, not sure whether to speak. "You offering a job or something else?" he asked finally. "Maybe both," she said, eyes bright with mischief. Cole laughed softly. "You sure you want a rancher hanging around here all the time?" "I've been sure since the night you knocked on that door," she said. The wind sighed through the cracks in the cabin, and the fire gave a small pop. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Then I reckon I'll stay." Winter followed, long and white. The two of them faced it together, feeding stock, breaking ice for water, mending roofs after the heavy snow. The world outside could be brutal, but inside the cabin there was warmth that went beyond the fire. Some nights, when the wind howled and the walls creaked, they'd sit close, sharing stories of old times, her childhood in Tennessee, his boyhood dreams of seeing the ocean. Each tale stitched another thread between them. One evening, Mara said quietly, "Funny how the world can feel so small when you're alone, and so endless when you've got someone beside you." Cole looked at her across the firelight. "That's what the old-timers meant by calling it God's country. It's wide open, but it only matters when you've got a reason to stay." She smiled. "And you found yours?" He nodded. "Think so." Spring came again, soft and green. The cabin roof gleamed new where he'd repaired it. Calves bawled in the pasture. The air smelled of wet earth and blossoms. One morning, as the sun climbed over the hills, Mara and Cole rode out together side by side. From the ridge, they could see miles of open country, valleys shining with dew, rivers like silver threads. Mara drew her horse to a stop and turned toward him. "Everything out there," she said quietly. "It's been waiting for both of us." He looked at her, the wind tugging gently at his coat. "Then let's not keep it waiting any longer." They rode down into the light, two small figures against the endless plain. Years later, folks in town would still talk about them. The woman who built her own homestead, and the rancher who lost his way in a storm but found a life instead. When people asked about their story, the old hands would just smile and say, "That's what happens when the sky opens up for you." Some hearts are wide open too, and somewhere out on the prairie, where the grass bends with the wind and the land hums with its quiet song, the cabin still stands, weathered, strong, and filled with the echo of laughter carried on the breeze. Because love, once found under that kind of sky, never really leaves. It stays wide open just for you.